Welcome back to Coaching Conversations. I'm Maria Sabia.
And I'm Lourdes Slaper. Stay with us right to the end for some practical practices you can use right away.
So today we're talking about the, most sophisticated form of self-sabotage, inaction. And, think about your life right now. You're not drinking too much, maybe you're not yelling at your spouse. You're basically being a decent person. But you feel stuck and you feel this chronic low grade guilt about the things that you should be doing. And the difficult conversation you keep postponing, the business idea you haven't started, the financial plan you won't even look at.
Yes, and this lack of action causes decision fatigue, right? All of the things we don't take action on weigh on us. We think we're being moderate or controlled by avoiding a choice, but we're actually making a choice to suffer slowly. We're being mastered by inertia and committed to standing still. The quote we're sharing today shines a light on this lack of action. And here it is. Making mistakes isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you don't do. And sometimes holding back or staying silent is just as misguided as going too far.
Yeah, because self-discipline isn't just a brake pedal. It's a sophisticated navigation system, and it requires the wisdom to restrain our lower impulses and the courage to initiate our rational mind. And this, however, it isn't always happening. We all have experienced, these moments where we think that not doing something, that's going to be okay, that the situation is going to somehow resolve itself or just fix itself. And even though that maybe has happened, a couple of times for you, maybe for some of us it hasn't happened at all. Um, you know, we still cling to that illusion that hiding and not doing something is going to be okay.
Yeah, most of us have probably suffered the consequences of not taking action. Um, you know, for example, with regard to our health habits, we know we need a specific routine, better sleep, hygiene, consistent movement, staying hydrated, and, following a healthy diet. But instead of actively committing, we passively manage our health with small token efforts, and we tell ourselves, oh, I'll start next week. And that's actually, not moderation. It's actually neglect, not taking the actions we know would serve us. And in doing this, we create a deficit with regard to our sleep, our health, and our overall well-being, because we believe the false narrative, I can afford to put this off. In our mind, the cost is only abstract and exists in the future, down the line. And that belief allows us to discount the future harm for the comfort of the present moment. But that future harm, that cost will be due, and we're the ones who'll have to pay it.
Yeah, and another place that it shows up is, in our relationships with either our partner, our child, a friend, and also at work. You have a point where you have this tension, maybe because they keep breaking a boundary and it's a recurring boundary issue, or you constantly have a miscommunication, or sometimes you have the same fight over and over again. It's just about a different issue. And we know the conversation is necessary, but it feels heavy, it feels risky, and that it's going to cause some sort of conflict. Maybe even it's going to force you to face the truth and take action that you've been avoiding. So you basically swallow it. And we've chosen this surface level peace over the deep relational health, our personal relationship with ourselves, and the relationship that we're currently in, whether it's the child or your partner. And we have this thing, we could keep thinking that we're going to keep the peace at all costs. And the thing is that the reason we keep saying or we keep going with that theory, we're going to keep the peace at all costs, is because underneath we think that by staying this way, we're going to keep being safe and we're going to, be secure. That this not saying something is going to keep us, basically keep us safe. And their ignorance and agreement is something that we need, so we can't say something. So by refusing to speak the necessary truth, we're letting a small solvable problem just metastasize into this potential crises. We could be building resentments and greater distance in our relationships by not doing anything. And we're choosing apathy over commitment to an authentic relationship. That again is self-sabotage.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that really resonates. The keeping the peace at all costs.
Mm.
I definitely was stuck in that kind of behavior pattern for quite some time. I was very passive. I was a very meek version of who I am today. I kept quiet a lot because I felt insecure about the act of speaking out, and also the outcomes, the potential outcomes, like
Hmm.
what's going to happen, what was the reaction going to be. And this habit was very diminishing and damaging to my sense of
Mm.
self. My integrity was definitely compromised due to my inaction. And, you know, I knew that I should speak up, stand up for myself, and be more assertive, but the fear of the
Hmm.
conflict and the blowback overrode all of those inner signals. And I definitely sacrificed my sense of self, my sense of
Hmm.
responsibility, authenticity, my values, in order to stay in this safe space. And that was a failure of self control and a lack of courage. So, the bottom line is doing nothing is not neutral. It has consequences. And when we give in to the excess fear and anxiety and seek the safety of comfort in the known and familiar, um, you know, we cling to that even when the familiar is uncomfortable.
Yeah, in today's world, or at least in our part of the world, most of us don't have these huge moral battles. We just have these small struggles of integrity. But they're still really important because if we want to be a person of integrity, or sometimes we feel empty, or we feel like we don't even know who we are or what our purpose is, if we want to feel proud instead of this emptiness inside, we need to take action. We need to take action in these small struggles of integrity because that's what ultimately defines us, and that's how we know who we are. Most of us feel profoundly afraid of rejection and failure, and as I said, in the blowback. And we fear the moment, where we move from the potential to action. Potential is safe, it's perfect, it has no risk. But the minute we speak the hard truth and launch into, that conversation that we didn't have, or even if we, launch a business, a website, or take any kind of action, we've taken a position as the person who did that, the person that said that. And if that thing, if it fails, if it has that blowback, or that truth is rejected, then we feel like we failed. We feel vulnerable, and we feel like we're the ones that are rejected.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk there, right? And
Hmm.
often we fear the irreversibility of our decisions and choices. right? We avoid the necessary tension because we want to maintain the illusion that we can always retreat back to the safety of not choosing. We want the power of the option more than the power of the accomplishment. And that's a huge trade off we make every single day. We choose the gray area over clear responsibility because the gray area gives us an escape clause.
Right. We don't act, we don't have to face the outcome of the failure. If we never speak up and we never have to deal with the consequences of that conflict, right? We're safe. We think we're safe. We have an illusion of safety. Because, again, if we never start the project, we never have to deal with the shame of its closure. But that cost of this inertia is the breakdown of our own character and its true potential. And we chip away at our own self-trust by this the habitual fear and inertia of overriding any action that we take. And that's, like I said, it's a quiet betrayal of ourselves, of the self. And it's the hardest trust for us to regain our own self-trust.
Yeah, that when stillness does not work for us, right?
Mm.
So let's not forget about the consequences of omission, right? We usually focus on the ethical weight of what we do, the lie we told, the unkind word we said, right? But the Stoics understood the moral weight of what we omit because we are responsible for the things we could have prevented or the good we could have created, but chose not to.
Yeah, that's the difference between a mistake and a moral failure. A mistake, it's accidental, right? It's an accidental damage. A moral failure of a mission is a willful retreat from the responsibility. When you see your partner struggling with the weight of the household duties and you passively sit there, by believing, well, it's not my turn to do whatever. We're not just relaxing, we're actively increasing their burden. We are using our own, our inaction as a form of neglect.
Mm. And what does that neglect or avoidance cost us, right? It costs us the virtue of being fair and kind.
Hmm.
We neglect taking action instead of taking responsibility, but it's in that very act of taking responsibility that would lead us to feeling whole. That quiet resentment we feel when our world isn't perfect is often because we didn't step up and fix the thing we knew needed fixing. It's the constant feeling that we're not fully participating in our own lives.
Hmm.
So if our inaction isn't a passive pause, but a profound choice driven by an excess of fear or excess of comfort, let's look at some reasons behind why we continuously choose the option that we know creates long term debt and guarantees future suffering.
That's for sure. So one reason is that we keep pouring energy into something that's already failing. But the fallacy of inaction is that we believe if we just, if we hold still, we that we're going to avoid that future loss. Um, we want to preserve the perfect, untouched potential, either of our career, maybe our image, or our relationship. And that belief, that's a toxic illusion because it's just an illusion. And we trade the anxiety of a hard decision for the chronic low grade anxiety that is a result of that inertia, you know, doing what we should be doing and not doing, not doing anything at all. we feel overwhelmed and unsafe because we're actively resisting taking any kind of position and taking any action. And that quiet betrayal of self, letting our responsibility just slide, is what just, chips away again at our ability to lead our lives fully.
Yes, absolutely. Let's talk about the specific relational harm of this passive self control, especially for like working parents and partners. Um, when you refuse to step up and do what you said you would do, you create a mental burden for your partner.
Mm.
It becomes an invisible load that you've just placed on their lap. This could be things like taking care of the kids' school paperwork, planning for home repairs, researching new insurance policies, the fabulous stuff of life, right? All of the effort and decision making you avoid gets dumped on your partner. You're effectively committing to being a kind of passive slacker in your partnership.
That's a term, passive slacker. you know that delegating of the mental burden, it destroys trust faster than any single mistake that you could make. You could have made a mistake with the calendar, mistake with the kids' homework, anything, but delegating that mental burden, that really destroys the relationship. When your partner knows a chore, a task belongs to you, whether it's your financial accounting or the car maintenance, whatever it is, the homework, even emptying the dishwasher, and you leave it untouched due to your, avoidance habit, you're forcing them to carry the burden. The resentment here is so deep because your partner is carrying the load. It it's just it just isn't about doing the task. They're carrying the load of, remembering the deadlines or chasing down updates, or ultimately the doing the thing you promised to do and taking on the burden of your responsibility or your portion of the responsibility. And true commitment in a relationship is acting as equal partners who actively seek to reduce the other's mental load, not passively increase it. This active commitment is the highest form of mature love.
So we have to ask ourselves, is my inaction allowing the people I care about to live their
Mhm.
lives more fully? Or am I forcing them to live with chronic anxiety and exhaustion? Am I forcing a smaller future on them because they have to compensate for my fear and apathy? Accepting your responsibilities and taking action when appropriate is a commitment not just to yourself, but to your relationships. And yes, sometimes this commitment will cause you conflict and discomfort, but that isn't a reason to cause your partner, your friends, or your family to carry your share of the burden or responsibility. The pain of causing this imbalance often drives us to even more distraction and avoidance. It becomes like a reinforcing negative loop. Guilt from inaction leads to more comfort seeking, which leads to greater inaction. And, this is a biological force because our brain is literally wired to choose the path of least resistance. If we can understand that, then we can stop confusing avoidance with moderation and start addressing our autopilot mode and the path of least resistance.
Yeah, when we're in the right state of mind, we make those tough decisions and we see what needs to get done and then we just do it. However, when we're tired or we're stressed or we're dealing with, you know, uh, a lot of work, we're dealing with emotional baggage or the control of, all of that stuff that you're dealing with is too much and you're overwhelmed, then everything gets handed over to your autopilot. And all the things you do without thinking, like, driving home or brushing your teeth, it's the default to the easiest, most practiced pathway. And for many of us, the pathway of inaction and silence and delay have become that habitual choice. That's the autopilot. And most of us choose the path of least resistance instead of the route of effort and action. And the beauty of this is that, it's actually learned behavior, which means it can be unlearned. And the way to break that autopilot and the inertia is to introduce small, deliberate points of friction to consciously, force yourself to make choices. That's why active self-control isn't a sudden, grand movement. It's a commitment to these really small, consistent, and frequent choices.
Yes. So let's break it down. Here's how to break out of autopilot mode. Start with the moment. The mindful moment before taking action. Pause and take 3 deep breaths. Ground yourself in the present moment using, an anchor of choice, whatever is most effective for you, right? Whether it's your breath, a physical sensation in the body, or maybe a visual anchor, can even be a mantra, but ground yourself in the present moment. And then stop and ask yourself a question like, how can I instantly eliminate one piece of guilt I feel about my life right now? And really take time to evaluate the situation and your contribution to that guilt that you're feeling, that unease that you're experiencing due to your inaction.
Yes. And take one step. If the needed action is a conversation you've been avoiding, structure the dialogue with 0 emotional words. Commit only to delivering the necessary information. I need to discuss our shared responsibilities because the current arrangement is not working. Your commitment is to clarity and to speaking mindfully. So don't make it personal. And the integrity check. Once the difficult action is taken, the tough conversation, the task started, don't measure your success by the other person's reaction or the immediate result. Measure it by your own commitment. Did I act with integrity, courage, and clear intention? And if the answer is yes, you're successful regardless of the chaos. The truth is, true moderation is the art of finding balance. It's not about being motionless or frantic. It's about being deliberate in your thoughts, judgments, and action.
Yeah, you're designed for purpose and your responsibilities require movement and action. So don't let fear wrap you up in inaction.
Yeah, you have to let your higher self lead you forward.
So we'll leave you with this bit of wisdom from our soon to be released book, A Path to Resilience: Small Steps to an Unshakable You. Making mistakes isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you don't do. And sometimes holding back or staying silent is just as misguided as going too far.
Yeah, this week we challenge you to take action and apply the 4-point framework on one thing you've been putting off, for a while now, right? We'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for being here. We're walking this path right alongside you. Take care of your heart, take care of your mind, take care of yourself, and support our work by liking, following, subscribing, and sharing this with someone who needs a reminder that they're stronger than they think they are. We'll see you next time.